Thanks. Please be seated. Order, honorable members. The Secretary will read the order of the day.
Introduction, Appropriation Bill, and the tabling of the Division of Revenue Bill.
The Honorable, the Minister of Finance.
Yo. Thank you.
Siyabulela, tata, siyabulela. Siyabulela. Sicela ukuqhubeka nomsebenzi wendlu. The Honorable, the Minister, please proceed.
Honorable Speaker, Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President, Cabinet colleagues and Deputy Ministers, the Governor and Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank, the MECs for Finance, and fellow South Africans. Sanbonani, Molweni, Goeiemiddag, Tobela, Dumelang, Absheni, Saubandani, Indima C. Ari, Lochani. Good afternoon. Before I proceed, Madam Speaker, on your behalf and with your consent, I wish to recognize two schools, apparently, that have been invited by yourselves for their spectacular pass rates. The first one looks very suspicious because it's from Tala, and I see the Secretary General in the audience there. And this senior secondary school in 2015 had a 92% matric pass rate, and in 2016 received the MEC award, and there's an individual amongst them, N. Atinkonsi, who received the MEC award and is currently studying at the UCT. And secondly, the Masibambisani High School from Delft in Cape Town. Can you congratulate them for being here, please? Honorable Speaker, I have the privilege to present our government's budget for the fiscal year 2017-18 and the framework for the next 3 years. I am mindful of the context of our own transformation challenges and the stresses in the global environment, which remind me of Oliver Tambo's unwavering vision, and I quote, "We seek to create a united, democratic, and non-racial society. We have a vision of South Africa in which black and white shall live and work together as equals in conditions of peace and prosperity. We seek to remake our part of the world into a corner of the globe of which all of humanity can be proud," end of quote. In the words similarly of the Freedom Charter, South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And in drafting our Constitution, this was a central foundational principle, and the values of freedom, dignity, and equality are embedded in our law and in our polity. This is also why our Constitution requires that all who live in our country, and that's all who live in our country, should have access to housing, medical care, social security, water, and education. There should be a progressive realization of access to tertiary education and other elements in a comprehensive set of social entitlements. Wealth and economic opportunities must be equitably shared. These commitments impose an obligation on government, but also on other role players and stakeholders in society. These realities, or some of these realities we are familiar with, but let us state the reality of life in South Africa. Wealth remains highly concentrated. 95% of wealth is in the hands of 10% of the population. 35% of the labor force are unemployed or have given up hope of finding work. Despite our progress in education, over half of all children in grade 5 cannot yet read adequately in any language. More than half of all school leavers each year enter the labor market without a senior certificate pass. 75% of these will still be unemployed 5 years later. Our towns and cities remain divided, spatially and otherwise, and poverty is concentrated in townships, informal settlements, and rural areas. Our growth has been too slow, just 1% a year in real per capita terms over the past 25 years, well below that of countries such as Brazil, Turkey, Indonesia, India, and China. These are our realities. These are the realities that we must seek to transform and change. They mirror the stresses of poverty and vulnerability in many developing countries and the inequality between rich and poor throughout the world. Even in the developed world, there are fault lines and high levels of uncertainty today. Citizens lack trust in elites, and that includes, as I've always said, all of us. Growing inequality in societies both developed and developing. Globalization is benefiting only a few, the top 1% or 10%. Stagnant and falling incomes are the fate of the middle classes in many parts of the world. These, among other factors, are also a case for radical transformation of economic models and a call for inclusive growth both here and elsewhere in the world. The President has rightly emphasized requirements for transformation and change in South Africa are wide-ranging. Just give me a minute. Laws and regulations, policies and their implementation, initiatives of national, provincial and local governments, our Black economic empowerment charters and the engagement of business, organized labor and civil society partners are all critical levers of change, and so is our budget. This is not a transformation to be achieved through conquest, conflict, or extortion as in our past. We do not seek to reproduce the racial divides and racial domination that was the hallmark of apartheid nationalism. Our transformation will be built through economic participation, partnerships and mobilization of all of our capacities. It is a transformation that must unite, not divide South Africans. This is the task entrusted to us by our leaders such as Oliver Tambo, Helen Joseph, Walter Sisulu, and Nelson Mandela. We find ourselves at a conjuncture which requires the wisdom of our elders to help us make the right choices and keep the trust of our citizens. Madam Speaker, today's budget message is that we are once again at a crossroads. Tough choices have to be made to achieve the development outcomes that we seek. As I pointed out, our economic growth is slow, unemployment is far too high, and many businesses and families are under stress. We face an uncertain and complex environment. At the same time, we face immense transformational challenges. We must overcome the inequalities and divisions of our society, and all South Africans must share in a prosperous future. We have a plan for a more inclusive and shared economy. Its implementation requires greater urgency, however, and effective collaboration amongst all social partners. Change, of course, is difficult, and often contested. In these tough times, we draw strength from the resilience and the diverse capabilities of our people, our business sector, our trade unions, and our social formations. The key features of the framework for the 2017 budget include the following. Expenditure is within the envelope projected in last year's budget and at the MTBPS. An additional 28 billion rands will be raised in taxes, and you'll hear in a moment how it affects you. The budget deficit for 2017-18 will be 3.1% of GDP, in line with our fiscal consolidation commitments. And government debt will stabilize at about 48 to 49% of GDP over the next 3 years. Redistribution in support of education services and municipal functions remain the central thrust of our spending programs. Government's wage bill has stabilized. Procurement reforms continue to improve the effectiveness of public spending and opening opportunities for small business participation. Our state-owned companies and financial institutions play a substantial role in infrastructure investing and financing development. Their borrowing requirements are taken into account in the overall fiscal framework that we present. As in past years, honorable members, the budget review and the estimates of national expenditure provide extensive details of developments in the economy, our fiscal and budget plans, and the programs and activities of government departments and public entities. Madam Speaker, allow me to comment briefly on the international economic outlook. After several years of tentative economic growth, there are signs that a more sustainable economy might be underway. Growth in the United States and Europe is steady, although at low levels. India and China remain comparatively buoyant, and economies such as Russia and Brazil are set to recover from their respective recessions. The IMF projects that the world economy will grow at 3.4% in 2017 and 3.5% in 2018. Still very modest growth. Many countries face the challenge of ensuring that as growth picks up, its benefits accrue to all in society. In the 2008 financial crisis and its aftermath, exposed deep fault lines in the world economy and in the distribution of income. Economic recovery has been slow. In several countries affected by unrest or war, there has been great hardships and dislocation of people, as we well know. The impact of trends in trade, technology, and commodity markets has been uneven across the world. These forces have heightened social and political pressures for change. Global strains manifest in various ways, honorable members, including the rise of strident economic nationalism and protectionist policies. Government and business leaders throughout the world have had to reflect on the deficit of trust and loss of social solidarity in their societies. Policies and programs that strengthen economic inclusion are being prioritized everywhere in the world. In the words of Pope Francis, and I quote, "Reforming the social structures which perpetuate poverty and the exclusion of the poor first requires a conversion of mind and heart." Close quotation. We require a similar conversion of heart and mind. We therefore welcome Germany's commitment to highlight Africa and its infrastructure financing requirements as a priority in its term as chair of the G20 countries. On the question of South Africa's economy, our expectation at this stage is that GDP growth will increase from 0.5% in the past year to 1.3% in 2017, and will continue to improve very moderately over the medium term. Clearly, these numbers are too low and highly inadequate. The services sector was the main contributor to growth in 2016, bringing nearly 120,000 new work opportunities to the table. Mining continued to underperform, while manufacturing output was supported by buoyant sales in petrochemicals, food and beverages, and motor vehicles. Mining and manufacturing employment declined by 80,000 jobs in 2016. Weak business confidence and low levels of profitability weighed on investment across all sectors. Though the policy interest rate has increased by 2 percentage points since 2014, inflation ended the year above target. The food prices continuing to reflect the impact on agriculture of poor rainfall. Lower growth amongst our trading partners in Africa and elsewhere has contributed to sluggish export performance. We expect somewhat higher growth in the coming year on the strength of a number of favorable trends that are emerging. Commodity prices have rebounded, and hopefully they stay that way. The exchange rate has recovered from its rapid depreciation last year, which bodes well for capital flows, inflation, and business and consumer confidence. Drought conditions have abated in most of the country. Production stoppages associated with industrial disputes have been comparatively low, and electricity supply has improved, allowing new connections and industrial demand to be accommodated. But the projected rate of growth is not sufficient to reduce unemployment or impact significantly on poverty and inequality. It falls well short of our NDP targets. Madam Speaker, we know what to do to get ourselves out of the present low growth trap. Now listen carefully to this. Ditau khedi shumshisana dikha bolaya nare. If lions work as a team, they will bring down even a buffalo. Shumishan. And we've got to be, honorable members, lions with all types of T-shirts on to bring the buffalo down. In order to boost investment in the short term, there are several specific imperatives. Finalizing legislation relating to mining development and land redistribution, implementing the transition from analog to digital television, which will release spectrum for broadband services, which Minister Kwele is anxiously waiting for, continuing our independent power producer program, both in renewables and to take advantage of gas investment opportunities, further strengthening of economic regulatory functions and streamlining investment approval processes. That's well on its way. Production-friendly industrial relations and prompt resolution of disputes that the Deputy President has been working on, an enabling environment for small enterprises, and support through leveraging both private and public sector procurement budgets, work that Minister Zulu is doing. Focused support on labor-intensive sectors of the economy, including agriculture, agro-processing, and tourism-related services. Strengthening regional ties and trade links, and safeguarding South Africa's investment-grade credit rating, which will be an issue once again this year. The 2017 budget, Madam Speaker, allocates funds over the MTF period to support economic growth in various programs. 3.9 billion rands for small, medium, and micro enterprises and cooperatives, 4.2 billion rands for industrial infrastructure in special economic zones and industrial parks, 1.9 billion rands for broadband implementation, 3.9 billion rands for the CSIR, an additional 494 million for tourism promotion, an additional 266 million to support the aquaculture sector and realize the goals of the oceans economy, Pakisa operation, and spending on agriculture, rural development, and land reform amounting to nearly 30 billion rands by 2019-2020. Effective implementation of these and other programs and initiatives will set us on a higher growth trajectory than currently projected. Progress in engagements between government, the business sector, trade unions, and social partners generally is imperative. To achieve sustained higher growth, there are also more fundamental and more radical transformation measures that are needed. These relate in particular to the way in which economic power is distributed in our society. The relationships between labor and capital, between rich and poor, black and white, men and women, town and township, urban and rural, still reflect the entrenched legacy of colonialism and apartheid. Wealth is produced and allocated along lines that remain fundamentally unjust. The ownership of assets and the distribution of income is captured by a minority of the population, a situation that is both morally wrong and economically unsustainable. We agree with the President that a new perspective on economic transformation is required. The principles that should guide our agenda, we suggest, for transformation include the following. The litmus test of our programs must be what do they do to create jobs, eliminate poverty, and narrow the inequality gap. Transformation must be mass-based, benefiting the most disadvantaged South Africans through the creation of new assets, capabilities, and opportunities to build real livelihoods. We have to mobilize both private and public sector investment in social and economic infrastructure, new technologies, and new activities that help build a modern and diversified economy. We must continue to confront cartels and collusion robustly and provide new opportunities for access to markets. Transformation must reshape our cities and the spatial arrangements we live in, and build linkages across rural and urban landscapes, where fragmentation and separation characterized past patterns. Transformation must achieve a more balanced structure of ownership and control in our economy. Transformation should also build on and strengthen democracy, entrench open, transparent governance, and the rule of law. Transformation must build self-reliance of South Africans and reject the dependence on debt and protect our fiscal sovereignty, which is quite crucial. It must also result in an economy that belongs to all, black and white, where the legacy of racial domination is no longer visible. In 1969, the ANC resolved, and I quote, "Our nationalism must not be confused with chauvinism or narrow nationalism of a previous epoch. It must not be confused with the classical drive by an elitist group among the oppressed people to gain ascendancy so that they can replace the oppressor in the exploitation of the masses." Quote, quotation. Transformation must unleash growth. It must establish a new economic direction, mobilize investment, empower the masses, and create new resources for social change. Of course, we still have a long way to go, but we're very aware of what we have to do. Let me turn to fiscal policy and the budget framework that we present today. Madam Speaker, the 2017 budget reflects a balance between maintaining our spending commitments and ensuring long-term health of the public finances. And that's the responsibility that the public has given us. Slow economic growth has held us back, and so decisive steps are needed to strengthen confidence, investment, and growth. Acting too quickly to reduce the deficit would harm service delivery, delay economic recovery, and compromise tax revenue collection. But to ignore our fiscal targets would result in interest rate hikes, unsustainable commitments, and credit rate downgrades. This is a scenario in which short-term gains would quickly give way to financial stress, capital flight, and cutbacks in service delivery. To ensure a balanced and sustainable recovery, we indicated in the medium-term budget policy statement that we will raise an additional 28 billion rands in tax revenues. We also need to reduce spending by a total of 26 billion rands over the next 2 years. The proposed expenditure for 2017-18 totals 1.56 trillion rands. Interest on debt amounts to 169 billion rands. So that's the interest that we're paying on 2.2 trillion rands worth of debt presently. And that begins to push out the kind of expenditure we want to undertake both on social services and on economic support. Projected revenue in this financial year or the coming financial year amounts to 1.4 trillion rands. The balance of 149 billion or 3.1% of GDP is the amount we need to borrow in 2017-2018. Let me repeat that. 149 billion rands needs to be borrowed in the year 2017-2018. Government debt now stands at 2.2 trillion rands, or about 50% of GDP. Interest payments are a rising share of expenditure, as I've just indicated, and by acting now to stabilize debt, we will ensure that future generations will not pay for today's expenses some 20 or 30 years hence. Over the medium term, expenditure on public services will continue to grow moderately above inflation. A substantial additional allocation to higher education is again proposed, adding 5 billion rands to the 32 billion rands previously announced. I thought Minister Nzimande will jump up a little bit. We will, of course, he's got a partner in the president these days. We will continue to safeguard expenditure that protects poor households. It is only right that if households and firms face tough choices in balancing their income and expenses, the same disciplines must be applied in public expenditure as well. In other words, that which we expect the public to do, we in government must also do. Citizens must rightly demand accountability to ensure public funds are used for the intended purposes. Honorable Speaker, I have received a variety of tips, not in the form of money, from members of the public. Ms. Fori wrote, and I quote, "I still wonder why we do not have tax as a subject in school. Perhaps the government should educate people from a young age about tax so that they will have an understanding that there is no government without taxpayers." Quite right, Ms. Fori. So having said that we will spend 1.56 trillion rands and that we will borrow 149 billion rands, where does the rest of the money come from? It comes from taxes, and where does the 28 billion rand increase in taxes come from? So for many years, honorable members, we have enjoyed the benefit of tax revenue collections outstripping economic growth. This contributed to our capacity to expand public service delivery. This year, revenue has lagged behind the economy, leading to a 30 billion rand shortfall by comparison with budget estimates a year ago. The revenue shortfall is mainly in personal income tax, value-added tax, and customs duties. This reflects, on the one hand, slower growth in wages, employment, and bonus payouts last year, and other factors as well. Our current expectation is that the total tax revenue for 16-17, as I indicated earlier, will be 1.14 trillion rands, which is an increase of 7% on the previous year. The tax proposals this year will raise an additional 28 billion rands by comparison with revenue estimates based on full adjustment of personal income tax and excise duties for inflation. The main tax proposals are, honorable members, a new top personal income tax rate of 45% for those with taxable incomes above 1.5 million rands. I thought you would clap for that. Because this is what you call progressive taxation. Those who earn more pay more. An increase in the dividend withholding tax rate from 15% to 20%, a limited bracket creep relief, increasing the tax-free threshold from 75,000 to 75,750 rands, an increase of 30 cents per litre in the general fuel levy, and 9 cents per litre in the road accident fund levy. Increases This is the most important part for some of you. Increases in the excise duties for alcohol and tobacco of between 6% and 10%. Relief will be provided in the affordable housing market, and this is an important measure we are taking to support people in the middle income groups through an increase in the threshold above which transfer duty is paid, or put it the other way, in the past, if you bought a house for 750,000 rands or less, no transfer duty was paid, and as the new tax year starts, if you buy a house for 900,000 rands and less, no transfer duty is to be paid. I've been asked by Minister Sisulu to communicate the following, that property owners must endeavor to retain ownership of their assets, particularly at the lower income groups, for much longer than they do, in order that over time those assets will appreciate and help in the creation of wealth. It's a message we need to send out to all South Africans. The annual allowance for tax-free accounts will be increased to 33,000 from 30,000 rands. The medical tax credit will be increased in line with inflation this year. It should be noted that consideration is being given to possible reductions in this subsidy in the future as part of the financing framework for the new national health insurance. Further consultations are currently taking place on the other matter that concerns some of you, on the tax on sugary beverages. Arising from these discussions and working closely with the Department of Health, the proposed design has been revised to include both what are called intrinsic and added sugars. The tax will be implemented later this year once details are finalized and the legislation is passed by yourselves. The proposed carbon tax and its date of implementation will be considered later this year by Parliament. On the question of combating tax avoidance, or ducking taxes, if you put it in simple language, multinational corporations continue to use inconsistencies in global tax rules to their advantage and to avoid tax liabilities. In fact, you have many multinational corporations that are residing in 150 or 200 countries and end up paying very little or no tax to any country. South Africa intends to sign a multilateral instrument this year which will assist in the updating of treaties and will reduce the scope for aggressive tax avoidance activities. Applications to the Special Voluntary Disclosure Program have once again been initiated. SARS has already received disclosures of 3.8 billion rands in foreign assets, which will yield revenue of about 600 million rands. So if any of you have friends or family that have assets outside that they haven't disclosed, here's an opportunity to come forward to SARS and declare your monies. The program, please note, will be open until the end of August this year. The automatic exchange of information between tax authorities will come into operation in September this year. Honourable members, this is a very important development, where in the past, tax authorities of different countries had the option to either give information or not give information. Part of the international campaign against base erosion and profit shifting is that automatically countries, once requested, must provide information on a taxpayer that is operating in another jurisdiction whilst being investigated by, for example, our jurisdiction. That's a very important measure. Multinational companies will be required to file further information with SARS on cross-border activities from the end of the year. We will continue to work actively with the international tax community and within government to modernize customs administration, combat cross-border revenue leakages, money laundering, and harmful tax practices. Honourable members, an efficient and trusted tax administration is one of South Africa's institutional strengths. SARS has played an integral role in building the democratic state by ensuring that expected levels of revenue are available to fund spending programs. SARS must continue to develop the skills and capacity needed to enforce legislation and strengthen its efforts to curb tax avoidance and evasion and address transfer pricing, a component of illicit financial flows. Madam Speaker, I have requested the Davis Tax Committee last year to advise on an appropriate governance and accountability model for SARS. This was last done in 1994 by the Katz Commission. Some of you have been around since then, so you will remember. In the context of the envisaged Border Management Agency, Customs and Excise Administration has come under review. These are integral functions of our revenue system, and the Davis Committee has advised that it would be imprudent to fragment customs administration and customs duty collections. I agree with this, particularly in light of SARS's ongoing customs modernization program, which is critical to both our revenue and trade policy imperatives. I want to express my appreciation to the Deputy President and Minister Gigaba for the ongoing engagement on this matter. Continued strengthening of the capacity of SARS and enhancing its relationship with taxpayers is vital to our fiscal health. We will continue to call on Judge Davis and the Tax Committee for advice on how best to ensure that SARS remains a robust and effective collection agency. On the division of revenue, which is what is required of us by our Constitution, Honourable Members, our Constitution requires an equitable division of revenue between the spheres of government and sets out the criteria that govern this division. The funds available after providing for debt service costs and a contingency reserve increased by 6.9% to 1.24 trillion next year, and is expected to rise to 1.43 trillion in 2019-2020. Over the next 3 years, 47.5% of available funds are allocated to national government and departments, 43.4% to provinces, and 9.1% to local government. The division of revenue involves a substantial redistribution of resources from the wealthiest areas in our country, where most of our taxes are raised, to lower income communities and households. The allocations to predominantly rural municipalities are twice as large per household than those to metropolitan councils. The redistribution of resources is an enabling foundation for a broader transformation of services and opportunities in our cities, towns, and rural areas. Development also requires effective management of public services and promotion of enterprises and income-generating activities. As far as provincial financial management is concerned, let me share with you that in the context of our constrained fiscal environment, provinces have already made progress in reducing spending on non-core goods and services and in controlling personnel costs, and they need to be congratulated for their work. Which means national departments, you've got to catch up with them. Spending on non-essential goods and services fell in real terms by 7.1% in 2014-15, 6.1% in 15-16, and is anticipated to decline by 4.5% annually over the medium term. The proportion of provincial spending on personnel has declined to just under 60% in 2016-17, freeing up more resources to invest in services. Provinces have also, it's okay, you can do it, wake up your neighbors. Provinces have also put their public entities under review to eliminate duplication of activities and ensure effective governance and clear development mandates. 3 new conditional grants will take effect in 2017-18. They will expand access to early childhood development and improve facilities, provide for increased employment of social workers, and improve opportunities for learners with profound disabilities. The Auditor General has called for stronger leadership within provinces to remedy financial management challenges. Better cash management is needed to ensure suppliers are paid on time. Improved oversight is needed to curb unauthorized expenditure. And there must be adherence to the procurement rules to limit irregular expenditure. As far as municipalities are concerned, government continues to invest in improving the financial capability of municipalities. In the period ahead, National Treasury and provincial treasuries have agreed to focus their efforts on 4, hopefully, game changers. The first is the new Municipal Standard Chart of Accounts, which will be implemented from 1 July 2017, contributing to greater transparency and consistency of municipal finances. Secondly, targeted supply chain management interventions to achieve cost savings and combat fraud. Thirdly, enhanced revenue management, including appropriate tariff setting, regular billing, and effective collection systems, which is at the heart of good financial management at the municipal level. And lastly, improved asset management, including adherence to 8% of the value of assets being spent on their maintenance. In South Africa, we have this disease where we want to constantly put in new infrastructure while not spending enough money to maintain existing infrastructure. If we make progress in local financial management, we will transform the lives of millions of people across the country. Now, what is the relationship between the budget and the transformation that we require in our economy and society? Madam Speaker, the budget gives effect to our transformation action agenda by financing government programs which firstly ensure that many more people live in dignity every single year, radically improve access to services and economic participation across all racial lines, energize growth and create jobs, increase investment and development at national, provincial, and local level, mobilizing resources across government, business, and other sectors of our society. A growing economy makes more rapid transformation possible, but it is the fiscal system that is the most direct vehicle for redistribution and inclusivity. The South African budget finances the construction of houses and schools, the education of young people, care for the elderly, and incomes of the most vulnerable in our society. About 2/3 of the budget is dedicated to realizing social rights in South Africa, which is a huge achievement for all of us. We have programs that build infrastructure, support new businesses, empower small farmers, develop human capabilities, and incentivize job creation. The budget is already highly redistributive to the poor and the working families. But the budget alone cannot achieve our transformation goals. We need a powerful combination of effective and targeted government delivery of economic programs, an energetic coalition with labor, business, and civil society which acts together and in a synergistic way, a consensus amongst all of our social partners on a transformation program with each of us clear about the contribution and sacrifices we have to make to ensure optimal inclusivity of all of our people. A commitment to eradicate gross inequality and share the benefits of growth and restructuring of the economy across all of our people. Government can be, of course, an important catalyst, but it cannot carry all of the responsibility for ensuring that every citizen experiences a palpable and real change in wealth, in dignity, and in well-being. This has to be our collective choice as South Africans. So how do we develop or work towards a transformation action agenda? Transformation is in part about overcoming the legacy of exclusion and inequality of the past, but it is also about restructuring the economy to take advantage of new technologies, new forms of market access, and investment opportunities. It's about investing in social capabilities through better outcomes in health and education and skills development, and through inclusive and responsive institutions. Let me say clearly and emphatically, sound public finances, the health of our financial institutions, investment-grade credit ratings, and our competitive public procurement processes are all valued elements in the sustainability and integrity of our transformation path. In other words, without doing the right things financially, we can't go about implementing all the ambitions and programs we have. It just won't work. So also are the clarity of vision and the details of the sectoral priorities and programs set out in the National Development Plan. Radical transformation and inclusive growth touch many aspects of social organization and economic activity. Renewal and wider participation have to be opened up across as broad a range of industries and social formations as possible. The portfolio of every member of cabinet, every provincial MEC, and every member of mayoral committees, indeed all councillors, are involved, while responsibilities arise in business, every NGO, and every voluntary association in our communities. And we need to see progress rapidly. There's a growing impatience and ferment amongst our people. Can we channel this energy into constructive activism and productive collaboration is the question we have to answer. Allow me to emphasize 5 critical priorities in which government is committed to work with the private sector and other social partners to propel inclusive growth. Firstly, improved education is a central priority, and particularly the quality of basic literacy and numeracy achieved in the first phase of schooling. We must increase funding for proven interventions in this regard. Secondly, reform of technical and vocational education and training programs is vital so that they effectively meet the occupational and industrial needs of our economy. We must strengthen collaboration between employers and TVET colleges, as Minister Nzimande will ask. We must accelerate development of our cities, housing investment, improve public transport and urban enterprise and industrial development. South Africa's integration and linkages with its regional neighbors offer significant opportunities for enterprise growth, agricultural development, and new industrialists and industries. Reform of domestic market structures, promotion of competition, deconcentration of monopolized industries, public and private, and greater private sector participation in sectors that might be currently dominated by public enterprises will all benefit us at the end of the day. These are structural reforms which bring opportunities for business development, modernization, and a more balanced distribution of wealth and opportunities for all of our people. In regard to market concentration, honorable members, I need to commend the work of the competition authorities under Minister Patel's leadership. These are difficult regulatory issues that we've witnessed recently, particularly where the activities in question involve large institutions operating in internationally integrated and complex markets such as the financial markets. In the year ahead, the Department of Economic Development will finalize the establishment of the Terisano Fund to be financed from the construction sector settlement. It will boost much-needed skills amongst Black South Africans and support emerging enterprises in the construction sector. It's just water. Alcohol is too expensive now. An initial amount of 117 million rands is earmarked for the adjustments appropriation this year. If we transform competitive markets effectively, we will see more rapid growth. If we achieve faster growth, we will see greater transformation, enterprise development, and greater participation in the economy. As far as economic infrastructure and investment is concerned, Madam Speaker, the reform of state-owned companies is an especially important part of the restructuring and strengthening of our economy. State-owned enterprises or companies are governed by a strong legal framework, and Cabinet has endorsed a series of measures to reinforce and clarify governance and accountability and clarify their development mandates. This imposes substantial obligations and responsibilities on boards and senior managers in these companies. We expect the highest standards of ethical leadership and understanding. With a combined asset base of 1.2 trillion rands, These state-owned companies are well placed to partner with the private sector investors in growing the productive capacity and infrastructure of our economy. But they must be financially strong, governance must be sound, and boards and executives must have the necessary competencies to run complex business enterprises. Eskom and Transnet especially have large responsibilities as dominant suppliers in major network industries. Their investment programs are important foundations for more rapid economic growth. The South African Post Office is consolidating its mail services and expanding the role of the Post Bank, which will soon reach new levels of formality. PRASA is in the third year of its rolling stock fleet renewal program. The IDC, the Land Bank, and the Development Bank of Southern Africa are financially sound and are steadily expanding their financing of industry, agriculture, and municipal infrastructure. Last week, I met members of the board of South African Airways to discuss its turnaround plans. I am pleased to report, I am pleased to report that the challenges are well understood amongst the board, and the advisory work that is in progress has clarified the way forward. We've also had constructive discussions with the new leadership of the Post Office. During the next few months, proposals for putting the capital structure of SAA and the Post Office on a sound footing will need to be agreed upon. The capital injection will be appropriated in the adjustment budget in October. We will finance this in a deficit-neutral way. And honourable members, the budget continues to prioritize both national and provincial economic infrastructure requirements. The Provincial Roads Maintenance Grant is allocated 10.8 billion rands in 17-18, taking into account the increase in road traffic volumes. SANRAL receives 15.4 billion rands over the period ahead for strengthening and maintenance of the national road network, which now stands at almost 22,000 kilometers. The Department of Telecommunications and Postal Services receives almost 2 billion rands over the medium term to invest in high-speed internet connections in public buildings and schools and in 8 NHI pilot districts. PRASA also continues to implement its modernization and rolling stock renewal program, and over the medium term, some 16.7 billion rands is allocated for 70 new trains, or train sets as they call it, for Metro Rail. The development and operation of integrated public transport networks funded through the Public Transport Network Grant received some 6 billion rands in 2017-18. To support higher density housing, subsidies for social housing have been rationalized, and some 600 million rands over the medium term is reprioritized to the Social Housing Regulatory Authority for investment in rental housing units. Madam Sisulu. As far as city development and human settlements and municipal infrastructure is concerned, Madam Speaker, sustainable communities require strengthened intergovernmental cooperation between national government, provinces, and municipalities. Improved alignment in the delivery of services such as housing, water, sanitation, electrification, and public transport is central to achieving the objectives set out in the Integrated Urban Development Framework. 18.4 billion rands over the medium term is allocated to the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant and some 12.5 billion rands to the Water Services Infrastructure Grant. These allocations continue to prioritize water provision in the 27 most impoverished district municipalities. 1 billion rand is added to the local government equitable share in 2018-19 in view of the rising household numbers and infrastructure maintenance requirements. Last year, Madam Speaker, I reported on the progress being made by our metropolitan municipalities in reversing the spatial legacy of apartheid through targeted investment in high-density corridors linking townships back into our cities. The spatial transformation is a massive challenge involving land acquisition and development, infrastructure and transport services, housing and industrial enterprise support. Much of this depends on collaboration between government and the private sector. We will continue to work with our cities to improve the safety and reliability of public transport services. Commuter rail currently provides for over 20% of all passengers carried into the cities. The budget provides resources to subsidize some 457 million rail passenger trips next year, as well as ongoing support to upgrade rolling stock and improve signaling systems. All our metropolitan municipalities are undertaking a portfolio of catalytic integrated urban development projects that will lead the way to reshaping our cities. Just to give you a few examples, in eThekwini, the Konuba mixed development node will yield 25,000 housing units, while over 13 billion rands in private sector investment in the nearby Dube trade port has been identified. A 30 billion rand inner city regeneration program is also underway. In Ekurhuleni, development along the corridor linking Tembisa to Kempton Park has been prioritized. In Cape Town, it has adopted a transit-oriented development strategy, including mixed-use development of the Belleville Transport Interchange, upgrade of the Philippi East Station Precinct, and the redevelopment of Athlone Power Station. In Mangaung, the airport development node is under construction, and 8,500 affordable housing units will be built in and around the inner city of Bloemfontein. In Johannesburg, there is further progress with the corridors of freedom linking Soweto, Alexandra, Sandton, and the CBD. This includes the new bridges that can be seen along the M1. We've also seen substantial investment in township precincts in response to the Neighborhood Development Partnership Grant. 190 projects have been completed, and a further 55 are in construction. In the Jubatina, Alabama hub in Matlosana, for example, an NDP investment in transport and health facilities has been accompanied by commercial investment commitments of some 155 million rands. In the Solomon Mashlangu node in Swane, which serves over 500,000 people, a 1 billion rand public investment in roads, parks, trading facilities is expected to leverage 4 billion rands in private investment. These are all excellent examples of public-private cooperation and synergies being developed. Encouraging investment. Okay, the cities are going to be very disappointed that you didn't applaud them, Encouraging investment in cities and townships requires initiatives of many arms of government. Minister Sisulu will shortly release a white paper on the reforms necessary to build more inclusive residential property markets and accelerate the upgrading of informal settlements. National Treasury is working with municipalities on measures to reduce the cost of dealing with construction permits, obtaining electricity connections, and the registration of property. The Department of Trade and Industry is leading a similar initiative with other departments and agencies to make it easier to start a business, to pay taxes, get credit, trade across our borders, enforce contracts, and resolve insolvencies. Madam Speaker, local initiatives are often key to progress in tourism and the hospitality industry. Ms. Lisa Sheard captured this well in her budget tip. Tourism encourages pride of place, end of quote. Pride of place ensures that water will run, the streets will be clean, and signage will be clear. Ms. Sheard also wrote that, and I quote, tourism is womanful. Women excel and dominate, she says. Tourism instills a good and honest work ethic. It will not make you rich and famous quickly, but it can be very rewarding, she says. With transformation, we will see growth, and growth will strengthen the forces of transformation. Thank Ms. Sheard for her ideas to Minister Honeycomb. Thank her, please. I caught him asleep there, you see. As far as health services are concerned, Madam Speaker, the government is moving towards the next phase of the implementation of the National Health Insurance. We are committed to achieving universal health coverage in line with the vision of the National Development Plan. 11 NHI pilots have yielded valuable insights on which we are now able to build further. These include, firstly, the design of contracts with general practitioners, Secondly, more effective chronic medicine dispensing. Thirdly, strengthening district health services through clinical specialist teams, ward-based outreach teams, and school health services, and supportive information systems. In the next phase of NHI implementation, an NHI fund will be established this year. Its initial focus will be, firstly, to improve access to a common set of maternal health and antenatal services and family planning services. Secondly, to expand the integrated school health programs, including provision of spectacles and hearing aids. And thirdly, to improve services for people with disabilities, the elderly, and mentally ill patients, including provision of wheelchairs and other assistive devices. Well done, Minister Motsoaledi. The service package financed by the NHI fund will be progressively expanded. In setting up the fund, we will look at various funding options, including possible adjustments to the tax credit on medical scheme contributions, and further details will be provided in the adjustments budget in October this year and in the course of the legislative processes. Taking into account the 160 submissions received from the public, the National Treasury and the Department of Health are working together to revise and finalize the NHI white paper and the long-term financing arrangements while we get the parallel process going. There will be consultations with stakeholders over the period ahead on reform of the medical scheme environment, including, honourable members, the consolidation of public sector funds. Over the next few months, we will work with Minister Motsoaledi, Minister Nzimande, and Minister Patel on planning the Limpopo Central Hospital and the new medical school of the University of Limpopo. Government is committed to increasing investment towards health promotion, targeting non-communicable diseases, alongside the implementation of the sugary drinks tax, such as diabetes screening and nutritional education. An additional 885 million rands has been added to support the implementation of the universal test and treat policy for HIV and 600 million rands for commissioning of the new Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital. Honourable members, the quality of our schools and further education institutions is at the heart of our commitment to our children's future. Improvements have to begin in the foundation phase of education in the education value chain. We will continue to increase resources for early childhood development, improve our basic education outcomes, and step up our support to TVET colleges and universities. Spending on basic education next year will be over 240 billion rands, or 17.5% of the consolidated budget. Allocations for school buildings increase at 12.5% a year. Minister Mutseka requires your encouragement. Spending on learning and teaching support materials increases by 9.5% over the next 3 years. Now, in this context, how are we supporting university students? Government recognizes the needs articulated by students in universities and TVET colleges. As the economy grows, we will be able to do more to finance an expansion in tertiary education opportunities and improvements in student funding. Madam Speaker, in addition to the increase of 32 billion rands we made in the higher education allocations in last year's budget and the 2016 MTBPS, we have added a further 5 billion rands in the outer year of this MTEF. Government has provided funds to ensure that no student whose combined family income is below 600,000 rands per annum will face fare increases at universities and TVET colleges for 2017. All poor students who have applied and qualify for NSFAS awards and who have been accepted by a university or TVET college will be supported. The Hare Commission of Inquiry into Higher Education and Training, established by the President, will complete its work by June this year. The Interministerial Committee on Higher Education, led by Minister Hadebe, is engaging all stakeholders to discuss the various issues affecting this area. Civil society initiatives involving business, churches, and other organizations have created both the space and the opportunity for a diversity of options to be considered. The President has invited stakeholders to participate in these processes that are underway so that all views are heard and all contributions accepted. Given the magnitude of student funding requirements, it is imperative that we find consensus on a clear roadmap towards a better higher education and training system, and a roadmap we're going to need for the next 5 to 10 years. It will clearly indicate how society will achieve access, opportunity, financing, and support for students in the university and further education sectors. Several broad principles assist in finding the way forward and developing this roadmap. Government is determined to address the challenges identified in post-school education and training in a phased manner. Resources will be taken into account in determining the pace with which these can be addressed. Government stands ready to engage with education stakeholders and adapt financing arrangements as may be required in future years within the scope of available resources. Universities, students, and education stakeholders share responsibility for improving access and quality and the diversity of higher education and training provided within a framework of consultation rather than confrontation. A growing contribution is needed from employers and industry through funding of bursaries, internship opportunities, and research programs, recognizing that this is the foundation of future productivity and technology advances in our economy. Together, we will find a way forward that meets student funding needs fairly and sustainably so that rising numbers of graduates can contribute positively to inclusive growth and transformation of the economy. Let's talk rather than fight. Honourable members, social assistance grants provide income support to the most vulnerable in our society. These will be increased in April to compensate for consumer price inflation. The old age grant will increase by 90 rands to 1,600 rands for pensioners over the age of 60 and 1,620 rands for those over the age of 75. The disability and care dependency grants will also increase by 90 rands to 1,600 rands. Foster care grants increased by 30 rands to 920 rands, and the child support grant increases by 20 rands to 380 rands a month. Madam Speaker, allow me to commend the work of the interdepartmental task team led by the Department of Women and Minister Susan Shabangu that is coordinating government support for the provision of sanitary pads to indigent women, including learners and students. The KwaZulu-Natal Department of Education is piloting the rollout of sanitary pads at schools, and I hope we will see complementary initiatives in other provinces as well. On the issue of public procurement, honourable members, public procurement will amount to 1.5 trillion rands over the next 3 years. Let me say that a little differently. We will pay about 500 billion rands a year for the delivery of goods and services as government, not transfers or handouts or cash distributions. The purpose is to acquire the infrastructure and operational inputs required for effective service delivery. Public procurement is also an important strategic vehicle for developing local industries, broadening economic participation, and creating work opportunities. Last month, we gazetted new preferential procurement regulations to achieve the following. Where large firms are awarded tenders of 30 million rands or more, 30% of the contract value must go to small or black-owned enterprises where feasible. Procurement authorities are now empowered to set clear targets to promote black-owned and women-owned businesses, participation of youth and disabled persons, and opportunities for rural enterprises and cooperatives. South African suppliers will enjoy preference in respect of goods with significant local content, thus supporting job creation in South Africa. Madam Speaker, there will be further procurement reforms this year. A draft public procurement bill will be published shortly. It will establish a single procurement authority and will consolidate the currently fragmented regulatory environment in keeping with Section 217 of our Constitution. The central supplier database is now fully operational. It has made doing business with the state much easier and cost-effective. It enables government to know who it is doing business with and to use technology to reduce the opportunities for fraud and corruption. Already large numbers of transactions have been identified for further investigation. Public service employees who appear to be doing business with the state is obviously they are out of order. Supply agreements that reflect the identity numbers of deceased persons, payments to bank accounts other than those of the relevant suppliers. These are all the issues that will be detectable with the new technology. Madam Speaker, in some cases we will find that there are legitimate explanations for some of the mishaps, but where fraud or corruption is identified, action must be taken. The Procurement Office currently manages 71 transversal contracts covering some 23,000 items worth 61 billion rands. Good progress is being made to find better value for money while expanding and diversifying the number of suppliers. Let me give you some examples. Savings of 675 million rands in 2016-17 on cell phones and vehicle contracts. The vehicle contract alone is expected to save the state between 1 billion and 1.5 billion per year over the medium term. In the property leasing sector, we expect savings of between 2 and 3 billion rands to be realized, while releasing resources for greater employment and contracting in building maintenance and services. Collaborative efforts between CETA and the National Treasury have led to savings of some 2.5 billion rands over the next 3 years in the 10 largest ICT equipment contracts. Working with the Department of Basic Education on cost-effective standards for building design, we have reduced the average cost of new schools from 70 million rands for 7,500 square meters to 34 million rands, almost half. I need to emphasize again that suppliers who have met their delivery obligations are entitled to payment within 30 days. Officials, please note. We will continue to monitor progress in meeting this particular commitment. The transformation of the financial sector. Since the global financial crisis in 2008, we, together with our partners in the G20, have been on a long journey to make the banking system safer and prevent the type of economic crisis that systemically important banks can trigger. We responded with a series of substantial, intrusive, and intensive regulatory reforms, both globally and in South Africa. Cabinet approved the shift to the Twin Peaks regulatory system to make the financial sector safer and serve South Africa better and reduce the risks to South Africa, introducing the following structural reforms to our regulatory system. In 2012, the new Financial Markets Act introduced the framework for unlisted derivatives, which caused so much of the damage in the 2008 global financial crisis, based on the subprime loans. In 2013, the Banks Amendment Act brought in requirements for increased capital and better liquidity management. In 2013, government took steps to deal with household over-indebtedness, starting with abuses in emolument attachment orders or garnishing orders. In 2015, former Minister Nene tabled the Financial Sector Regulation Bill to give effect to the Twin Peaks system. As soon as this bill is enacted, we will be able to establish a dedicated market conduct regulator to protect customers and ensure that they are treated fairly. Earlier this year, together with Minister Davies, new restrictions on credit life insurance were implemented, preventing the sale of retrenchment insurance to people without jobs, for example. As an employer, national government has investigated some 135,000 of these garnishee orders against state employees and reduced the number of deductions by some 50,000 at this stage. We hope all employers will assist their employees in the same kind of way, that is, safeguard them from unfair garnishing orders. As we have seen recently with the Competition Commission investigation, there is evidence of a collusive culture and a greedy culture at trading desks in banks. It is precisely to deal with such abuses that we have proposed a dedicated market conduct regulator, and we hope Parliament will pass this bill as soon as possible. Collusion must be stamped out, whether it is in the banking, construction, or the bread industry. But banks need tougher rules to cover financial market abuses, and the Reserve Bank and National Treasury have initiated work on a more comprehensive financial markets review under the leadership of former Deputy Governor James Cross to build on the review conducted in 2014. Although progress has been made in transforming the financial sector, more needs to be done to broaden access through more affordable financial services, improve market conduct, ensure employment equity at top management levels, provide procurement opportunities, and transform ownership. We live in an era, honourable members, of rapid technological change. 3 new banks have been granted provisional licenses, including the Post Bank, and 2 new stock exchanges. Their business models are based on technological innovation, with potential to bring services more cost-effectively to more people. In other words, to reduce charges that we pay to these institutions. I am pleased to announce that we will work with partners at NEDLAC, who have requested that a financial sector summit takes place in 2017 to consider further transformation in this sector. Honourable members, the 2017 budget has been prepared with a view to strengthening both our economic growth and the transformation of our society. This year's budget review sets out our point of departure, and I quote, "To achieve the vision of the Constitution, South Africa needs transformation that opens a path to inclusive economic growth and development. Transformation without economic growth would be narrow and unsustainable. Growth without transformation would only reinforce inequitable patterns of wealth inherited from the past," end of quotation. Although our own transformation imperatives derives from a particular historical trajectory, many analysts have pointed to similarities with social fragmentation and inequality challenges elsewhere in the world. In December last year, the economics profession lost one of its greatest champions of redistribution as a public policy priority. Professor Tony Atkinson was both a leading author and academic in the field of public economics and an expert in the study of distribution of income and wealth in both developed and developing countries. He provided compelling evidence that, in his words, and I quote, "less equality is associated with greater macroeconomic stability and more sustainable growth," end of quotation. He argued strongly for active policies to address inequality. The evidence supports our insistence on a progressive income tax structure, our ongoing work on health insurance and social security reform, our focus on further education and training, and our recognition of the structural and technological dimensions of the employment challenge all find resonance in Atkinson's policy proposals. With an international agenda in mind, he also set out the case for a global individual tax on total wealth, higher official development assistance by rich countries — I hope the diplomatic corps is listening to this carefully — improved access of households to credit markets, and guaranteed public employment for those out of work. These are some of his ideas. On one important reform, we have taken a giant step forward. We've agreed to implement a minimum wage, as the President and Deputy President have announced, of 20 rands an hour with effect from next year. Its implementation will require complementary measures to support workers and employers in vulnerable and low-wage sectors and enhanced assistance to young, unskilled work seekers. We also need to seek progress on social security reform, alongside phasing in the minimum wage. Our past efforts have come short of delivering either adequate growth or the social transformation we need. We are at a crossroads in that sense now. We need to act urgently to build confidence and support investment in our economy. We need to bring all stakeholders onto an inclusive growth and transformation path. We have proven that we can change course through negotiation, participation, and partnership. We have the resilience needed to move forward confidently, even in uncertain times. Last year, impetus was given to several initiatives under the leadership of Mr. Jabu Mabuza, as far as the CEO initiative is concerned. A fund to support small and medium-sized enterprises has been established voluntarily by the private sector to the tune of 1.5 billion rands, and that money is in the bank. A youth employment service program has been initiated with the aim of creating 1 million work opportunities over the next 3 years for our young people in private businesses. Strategic interventions to support black participation in agriculture have also been developed. In the year ahead, our focus must be on inclusive growth and a transformation action plan. Bold and ethical leadership is needed from all sectors of our society. In this way, we can all embrace a vision of substantive, meaningful transformation, which will allow us to say we all own our economy. In our communities, there are strong bonds and powerful traditions of caring for one another. These are wonderful social assets, and I believe that all of us can commit to doing more to make the lives of fellow South Africans better. Of course, obstacles there will be many. We must overcome them. Detractors will abound. This can't work, and that needs this kind of change or the other. Let's disprove them. Negativity inspired by greed and selfishness will try to obstruct this process, defeat the bearers of this toxic ethic. South Africans, wherever you are, you have an important contribution to make to transform our society and economy. Own this process, defend your gains, and demand accountability from all. Be an active agent for change. Umanyano Ngamandla, unity is power. So what are the main elements? It's been a long delivery, so let me wake you up. So what are the main elements of this budget? Firstly, while global growth is slightly better, geopolitical and economic uncertainties have increased. Our low growth trajectory provides a major challenge, honorable members, for government and citizens. We need to radically transform our economy so that we have a more diversified economy with more jobs, greater inclusivity in ownership and participation. Our financial situation is constrained, but we have still produced a credible budget, and there's lots of money in the system that we could use better. We need to prioritize our spending better, implement our plans more effectively, and make a greater impact with the money that we have. We need to build the widest possible partnership to promote consensus and action on a program of inclusive growth and transformation. Allow me, in conclusion, Mr. President, to thank you and the Deputy President for your guidance. I would also like to thank Cabinet colleagues and members of the Ministers' Committee on the Budget for their support and cooperation and wisdom. I thank the provincial premiers and finance MECs and municipal mayors who share our fiscal and financial responsibilities.
Point of order.
What's the point of order, Honorable? Please take your seat, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to call an order. There is no guidance that Zuma gives, that Mr. Zuma gives to the
Honorable
country.
Member, that's not a
He
point
must
of
not
order.
be thanked in the name of this
That's
parliament
not a point
or
of
in the name
order.
of the people of South Africa.
Please proceed, Honorable Minister.
As I was saying, we thank our provincial premiers and finance MECs and municipal mayors who share our fiscal and financial responsibilities. My sincere thanks to Deputy Minister Jonas and Director General So my thanks to Deputy Minister Jonas and Director General Fuzile for their absolute integrity and indefatigable commitment to public service. Honourable members of the House, you will join me in expressing our collective appreciation to the staff of the National Treasury, the South African Reserve Bank, the South African Revenue Service, and the finance family institutions. I'm also grateful to the Finance and Appropriation Committees who have responsibility for considering the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, and today's revenue and expenditure proposals. Honorable Karim, and De Beer is not listening. I paraphrase what I said, Honorable Speaker, in October last year. Fellow South Africans, if we make the right choices and do the right things, we will achieve a just and fair society, founded on human dignity and equality. We will indeed transform our economy and country so that we can all live in dignity, peace, and well-being. This is the time for activists, workers, business persons, the clergy, professionals, and citizens at large to actively engage in shaping the transformation agenda and ensuring that we do have a just and equitable society. We also need to consider, in the face of such intractable economic hardships and disparities, whether we should apply our minds to supplement our constitutional Bill of Rights with a Charter of Economic Rights, a charter that would bind all of us to an economy which provides access to decent and well-remunerated jobs, facilitates training and retraining of citizens in the face of technological changes, and creates a supportive environment for micro, small, and medium-sized businesses and cooperatives. So let's think about that and support that idea and get some consensus in our country as we go forward. Madam Speaker, we can draw inspiration from Nkosi Albert Luthuli in a time like this when he says, and I quote, "I believe that here in South Africa, with all our diversities of color and race, we will show the world a new pattern for democracy. There is a challenge for us to set a new example for all. Let us not sidestep this task," end of quote. That's the responsibility we have. Ours is a collective responsibility, despite many distractions, to live up to the expectations of Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Beyers Naudé, Nelson Mandela, Albert Luthuli, Yusuf Dadoo, Lillian Ngoyi, amongst many others. In this way, we will honor the confidence and trust that our people have put in us. In this way, our transformation efforts will serve all South Africans. In his tribute to the South African soldiers who lost their lives with the sinking of SS Mendi, the poet S.E.K. Mkai wrote, and I quote, "Ukonza nye, ukuze kupile abanye." Somebody has to serve so that others can live. Can we in this spirit say, we have built a better South Africa with a more inclusive economy and all citizens living in dignity, advancing economically over generations to come? And that's the question that our children and grandchildren will ask us. As I end, Honorable Speaker, I wish to table this bundle, the 2017 budget speech, the 2017 budget review, including the fiscal framework, the revenue proposals, including customs and excise duties, estimates of national revenue and replies to the Budgetary Review and Recommendations Report, the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, the estimates of national expenditure. Ingia Bonga, India Bulela, Danki, thank you, Kea Leboha, Nakenza, India Livhua, Ingia Tokoza. Thank you.
Order. Honorable members, on your behalf, I thank the Honorable Minister. The papers tabled by the Minister will be referred to the relevant committees. That concludes the business for the day. The House is adjourned.